On December 3, 2021, an official opening ceremony was held for the China-Laos High-Speed Rail, or HSR, linking the southwestern Chinese city of Kunming to the Lao capital of Vientiane. With the cost of $5.9 billion, the HSR took 6 years to complete. It is a crucial One Belt, One Road project for Beijing. What will it bring to China, Laos, and Southeast Asia? Will it bring wealth or debt?
10几天后，总书记出席中老铁路通车仪式。作为高质量共建“一带一路”的标志性工程。
The China-Laos HSR is 1,035 kilometers long, with 414 kilometers inside Laos. The new bullet train reduces the 15-hour journey from Vientiane to the border with China to less than 4 hours. The journey from Vientiane to Kunming, the capital city of Yunnan province in China, takes about 10 hours, allowing for an early morning departure and an overnight arrival. It is the first stop of Beijing's ambitious plan to connect China's underdeveloped inland areas to Singapore's busy seaport by train. That is, in the future, the HSR will be extended to Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. Laos is one of the poorest countries in Southeast Asia, with a population of 7.2 million. In Laos, the HSR runs at a maximum speed of 160 kilometers per hour, with freight trains running at 120 kilometers per hour, which is actually equivalent to a regular speed railroad. A study by the World Bank shows that the total potential passengers of the HSR in Laos is expected to be just at 480,000 by 2025, increasing to 1.1 million by 2030. A professor at Beijing Jiao Tong University's School of Economics and Management concluded after research that an HSR could only cover its operating cost when it reaches a transport density of 36 million passenger kilometer per kilometer. The highest transport density in China, the Beijing-Shanghai high-speed rail line, has a transport density of about 48 million passenger kilometer per kilometer, while the lowest one is only about 2.3 million passenger kilometer per kilometer. According to official Chinese figures, even the Beijing-Shanghai high-speed railway, which has the highest transport density, generates an annual profit of about $1.56 billion from assets of $34.5 billion, an asset yield of less than 5%, which is comparable to the bank's benchmark interest rate, and almost all the rest of China's HSRs are in the red. It is not surprising that for Laos, the revenue generated by passenger transport won't do much to cover the cost of huge debt deficits from construction and service. Freight transport should be a more pressing need for Laos. Laos hopes that it will help change its landlocked state to one that is more connected to other countries, attracting more foreign tourists and investors while sending more of its goods out of the country. Some analysts believe that in the long run, Laos intends to become more connected to the outside world, which would help the country's economy. But upon closer examination, it seems that this view is overly optimistic. Trade between China and Laos is modest. Laos has little to offer China except for some agricultural commodities and mining products such as copper ore. Even if agricultural products are to be transported to neighboring countries, there needs to be a corresponding road infrastructure to follow. Otherwise, this expensive high-speed railway will be reduced to a cross-border route. The China-Laos HSR project cost $5.9 billion, a figure that amounts to about 1/3 of Laos's total economic output. The government of Laos has pledged to assume 30% of the financial responsibility. That is, whether it is a loan or shares in the project, Laos is responsible for 30% of it. 60% of the project's funding, which was about $3.5 billion, came from a loan from Exim Bank of China. The remaining 40% was converted to project shares. The Laotian side was required to contribute a further $730 million in cash equivalent, of which $250 million came from the Laos state budget, and the remaining $480 million was to be financed by a loan from the same financing institution, the Exim Bank of China. As a result, Laos stands to incur a total debt of over $1.4 billion. The World Bank data for 2020 shows that Laos had a gross domestic product, or GDP, of close to $20 billion and a GDP per capita of only $2,630. Laos is building new special economic zones and trying to boost economic activity in manufacturing and services along and near the route. However, there lies an open question whether its government has the capacity to be efficient, clear, and transparent, and to regulate without complexity, among other things. During a visit in mid-June 2021, the Deputy Prime Minister of Laos called for the rail joint venture to employ more Laotians. Currently, the number of Laotian employees is about 700. The reality is Beijing has consistently seen its Belt and Road corridor as a prime opportunity to export its own labor, goods, credit, and capital, with little care over the job growth in the host countries. So what are the consequences of carrying $1.4 billion in debt for Laos? Back in September 2020, China's state news agency Xinhua said Laos's state-owned electricity enterprise EDL and China Southern Power Grid had signed a grid shareholder agreement but did not disclose details about the new ownership. 3 people familiar with the matter told Reuters at the time that Laos would hand over majority control of the newly formed state power company EDLT to the Chinese. There is speculation that the hydropower projects in Laos, as well as the high-speed rail project, would put Laos at risk of deep debt. Many of the hydroelectric projects in Laos are funded by the CCP in the name of helping to create a clean energy battery for Southeast Asia. A study published in 2019 by the Lowy Institute, an Australian think tank, revealed that Laos's debt to China was 45% of the country's GDP. Laos's outstanding debt has reached 2/3 of its annual economic output. The Center for Global Development, a Washington think tank, said in a March 2018 study that Belt and Road financing projects put 8 countries at high risk of debt distress. Laos was one of those 8 countries. There is little doubt that the high-speed rail project and other Chinese investments in Laos are creating a situation in which Laos is becoming increasingly economically dependent on China, which will translate in part into Chinese political and economic influence over Laos. Aid data research shows that if the joint venture defaults and the Chinese side chooses not to put in more money, Laos could be forced to repay $3.5 billion in debt incurred by both sides to keep the railway in operation. It is likely that the debt would need to be covered by the country's natural resources, such as bauxite and potash mines. Previously, under a 99-year lease, China has built, owned, and managed the small frontier town of Botan in Laos since 2003. For nearly 20 years, it has been the commercial center of China's presence in northern Laos. Laos has 2 neighboring countries, Thailand and China, which are 2 important world manufacturing centers. From a business perspective, both countries will benefit more from this China-Laos high-speed railroad, as its completion will help Thailand and China transport goods into Laos and help develop the Laos market. Compared to traditional sea transportation, China-Laos International Freight Train will save over half of the time, reducing transportation cost by a large margin.
主要包括农产品、纺织品和化工品，主要面向的是泰国、越南、马来西亚等东盟国家。
Building a high-speed rail network in Southeast Asia is an ambitious dream for China. If the China-Laos HSR is connected to Thailand in the future, the China-Thailand HSR will be able to reach the capital Bangkok directly. The Thai side of the China-Thailand HSR plan also extends the rail route to one of Bangkok's outer ports, which is also Thailand's largest deep-water container seaport, to facilitate the transportation of goods between China and Thailand. In recent years, Dawei, a town in southern Myanmar, has become a major destination for Chinese investment overseas. It's near the Andaman Sea and the Gulf of Thailand. Chinese energy companies have invested billions of dollars in the Dawei industrial zone. If Bangkok is connected to Dawei or Myanmar by rail, the distance is less than 200 kilometers. It means Chinese supplies can be shipped without going through the Straits of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca accounts for a quarter of the world's maritime trade, and China is its top user. 60% of the ships that pass through the strait each day are traveling to and from China. 80% of China's oil imports and 50% of its overall foreign trade go through the strait. If China's dream of a series of HSRs in Southeast Asia comes to fruition, China will reap a double benefit. One, it would greatly improve China's access to Southeast Asian countries by connecting China and its backyard via rail. And two, China could use the region's new special economic zones as nodes to control production, supply chains, and consumption. In this way, China could deepen its political and economic influence in Southeast Asia, while expanding the outlets for Chinese industrial goods and promoting economic growth and prosperity in southwestern China. But all of this will be based on an abundant supply of capital from China. At present, the Communist Party's foreign exchange reserves are running low and have likely bottomed out. It's not likely to have sufficient financial resources to promote the Belt and Road in the future. Of course, the Chinese media will not report this. They tell Chinese readers, good days are coming for the 7 million people in Laos.
在做好中老铁路国际货物列车通关保障工作中，我们勐拉海关不断优化通关流程，强化通关调度，完善疫情防控预案，运用目前国内最新科技处理监管，同时加强与铁路等相关部门的协作配合，加强对企业的政策解读、业务指导，确保中老铁路国际货物列车严密高效通关。
Now that the China-Laos HSR is complete, Beijing can focus on completing the rest of the line. Separate sections of the railroad are already under construction in Thailand and Malaysia. However, these two countries are more assertive than Laos in their negotiations with the CCP. The Thai government has approved the construction of a line from the Thai-Laos border to the capital Bangkok, but less than a third of this line is built so far. Thailand seems to have realized that it is being brought into the Chinese sphere of influence too quickly. Instead, it has switched to a more deliberate initiative, focusing first on developing a rail link between Bangkok and another major city. Rather than a direct line running through Bangkok and the northeastern border province in one go. It indicates that Thailand is not eager to establish a link with Laos, which is more beneficial to China. The Malaysia-Singapore HSR project, launched in 2010, was aborted in January 2021. It's quite disappointing for Beijing, as it means the railroad plan between Kunming, China, and Singapore also suffered a setback as a result. Singapore and Malaysia came together to jointly invest $25 billion in a 350-kilometer HSR that would cut travel time between the two capitals to 90 minutes. Once operational, it would have been the last section of the Trans-Asian Railway, proposed in 1995 to connect China's Kunming City to the ASEAN countries. Since 2018, Malaysia has been in political turmoil. Its government decided to abandon the project altogether after paying Singapore a cancellation fee. As for Myanmar, it was originally one of the most important stops for the CCP. The 1,700-kilometer-long China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, as part of the Belt and Road project, is a priority trade access route. This route would allow China to reach the Indian Ocean from the southwest, with the possibility of further westward expansion. Beijing has been working on it since 2015. But the example of Sri Lanka in 2017 has scared Myanmar. Sri Lanka is one of the first countries to support the Communist Party's Belt and Road Initiative. But it's precisely these projects that have plunged the small South Asian nation into debt. At one point, Sri Lanka's total debt was as high as $64 billion, with about 95% of the entire national revenue being used to service the debt. In December 2017, the country had to surrender a strategic port and 15,000 acres of land surrounding the port to the CCP on a 99-year lease due to its inability to repay its debts. This deal has allowed the CCP to control a large area just a few hundred miles from India's shores, as well as a strategic foothold along important commercial and military shipping lanes. That is, the conversion of debt is one flexible form of exerting influence by the CCP. Beijing has been using it to control foreign assets and force military access, etc. With this precedent in mind, in 2018, the Myanmar government decided to drastically cut the cost of a Chinese-invested port case from $7.3 billion to $1.3 billion, and cut the number of large cruise berths to the remaining 2. Myanmar is now in an unstable political and financial situation. The value of the China-Laos HSR will be greatly diminished if it is not extended to the economic centers of Southeast Asia.
推动高水平开放，更加深度融入全球经济。
China will promote high-level opening up, integrate itself more deeply into the global economy, and create new strengths for China's international economic cooperation and competition. It's an important strategic choice of grounding our work in this new stage of development and applying the new development philosophy. It's also a full manifestation and major practice of the socialist economic construction with Chinese characteristics, guided by Xi Jinping thought on socialist economy. It looks like the CCP will continue to push forward with its high-speed railroad to Southeast Asia. But amidst the grave economic downturn in China, Beijing will have to face the question of whether this will trigger a financial crisis of its own in turn.